Terror gripped Allied aircrews across Europe. A new predator stalked the skies. One devastating encounter could claim dozens of bombers. Experienced pilots vanished without trace. What transformed this unlikely design into aviation's most feared hunter? Why did military experts initially dismiss its radical engineering? The story begins where conventional wisdom ended. October skies stretched gray and forbidding over occupied Europe. Bomber formations droned eastward through thin clouds. Their silver wings caught fragments of sunlight. Below them waited death. British pilots had grown accustomed to the Messerschmitt's sharp silhouette. They understood its capabilities. Speed meant survival against the angular fighter. Altitude provided safety from its guns. Then the rules changed without warning. From above came something different. Stubby wings carved through morning mist. A radial engine's distinctive growl announced its presence. Cannon shells ripped through aluminum skin before anyone could react. Spitfire pilots found themselves outclassed instantly. Their aircraft rolled slower than this newcomer. Their climb rates couldn't match its performance. Panic spread through RAF squadrons. The mystery deepened with each encounter. No intelligence briefing had prepared them for this machine. Its profile matched no known German design. Some speculated about captured French aircraft pressed into service. Others suspected elaborate deception. The truth proved far more disturbing than anyone imagined. Germany had birthed a revolution in fighter design. The Focke-Wulf 190 emerged from unconventional thinking. Engineers had rejected traditional approaches. They embraced what others called obsolete. This machine earned the name Butcher Bird through systematic destruction. Its broad wings carried devastating firepower. Heavy armor protected vital systems. Pilot survival became paramount in its design philosophy. From Mediterranean shores to Arctic battlefields, the FW-190 carved legends. North African desert campaigns felt its sting. Eastern Front battles witnessed its fury. Every theater of war would know its presence. The aircraft shattered Allied confidence completely. Bomber crews whispered fearful stories. Fighter pilots requested transfers rather than face it. Even seasoned veterans trembled at its approach. How did such an improbable design achieve dominance? What factors allowed this seemingly backward concept to terrorize modern air forces? The answers lay buried in Germany's desperate search for aerial supremacy. Engineering brilliance emerged from military necessity. Kurt Tank envisioned something unprecedented. His radical philosophy challenged every accepted principle of fighter construction. While competitors chased speed records, Tank pursued different goals. He wanted machines that could endure punishment. Reliability mattered more than raw performance numbers. Pilot survival trumped theoretical advantages. The late 1930s demanded such thinking urgently. Europe teetered on war's precipice. Germany's existing fighters showed troubling weaknesses. The Messerschmitt 109 impressed crowds at air shows, but revealed flaws in combat conditions. Cramped cockpits hindered pilot effectiveness. Narrow landing gear caused training accidents. Liquid cooling systems proved vulnerable to battle damage. A single bullet could silence the engine permanently. Worse still, the Bf-109 demanded exceptional skill from its pilots. Young men with minimal training struggled to master its quirks. Landing approaches terrified even experienced aviators. Takeoff accidents claimed hundreds of Luftwaffe personnel. These casualties never saw enemy action. They died learning to fly their own aircraft. The waste appalled military planners. Germany needed something more forgiving. Kurt Tank had witnessed the Great War's mechanical failures firsthand. Mud clogged delicate mechanisms. Rain corroded precision components. Exhausted ground crews couldn't maintain finicky equipment properly. He understood that future conflicts would demand robust solutions. Elegance meant nothing if aircraft couldn't survive harsh conditions. The next fighter must be built like a cavalry horse rather than a thoroughbred. His proposal shocked the aviation establishment completely. Instead of inline engines, he chose radial power. The BMW 801 looked crude beside sleek, liquid-cooled designs. Critics dismissed it as backward thinking. Radial engines belonged on bombers, they argued. Modern fighters required streamlined noses for maximum speed. Tank disagreed with conventional wisdom entirely. He saw advantages others missed. A radial engine could absorb tremendous battle damage and continue running. Maintenance requirements stayed minimal even under field conditions. The engine itself formed armor protecting the pilot from frontal attacks. Beyond power plant selection, Tank reimagined every system. Landing gear would spread wide from wing roots, providing stability on rough airstrips. The cockpit would offer panoramic visibility in all directions. Controls received logical arrangement, reducing pilot workload during combat. Spacious accommodation allowed for thick winter clothing or survival gear. Every detail served practical rather than aesthetic purposes. This philosophy clashed with prevailing military doctrine sharply. European air forces prized agility above all other characteristics. Climb rate determined fighter rankings. Speed alone decided aerial supremacy. Tank envisioned broader capabilities in his design. One aircraft could attack ground targets effectively. The same machine could intercept heavy bombers successfully. Fighter versus fighter combat remained just one mission among many. Weight penalties didn't concern him as much as versatility. His fighter would be heavier than competitors, but far more adaptable. Multiple roles justified the compromises involved. Survival mattered more than records. The concept challenged Germany's military leadership directly. Resources were limited as war approached rapidly. Could the Reich afford two different fighter programs simultaneously? Wouldn't specialization produce better results? Tank argued that specialization created dangerous vulnerabilities. What happened when conditions didn't match designed parameters? How could Germany adapt if enemies developed countermeasures? Flexibility provided security. Britain's Spitfire program validated these concerns perfectly. Early versions excelled in specific conditions, but struggled elsewhere. High-altitude performance came at costs. Low-level capabilities suffered accordingly. Germany couldn't afford such limitations in coming conflicts. The Luftwaffe would face diverse challenges across multiple fronts. One fighter must handle everything from close air support to bomber interception duties. Official requirements emerged in 1938, reflecting these realities. A second frontline fighter would complement existing designs. It must fill gaps left by the Messerschmitt's specialization. Versatility ranked as high as performance. Timing couldn't have been more critical for this decision. Poland would fall within months of the specification's release. France would collapse before prototypes flew combat missions. Britain would stand alone against the gathering storm. When that moment arrived, German fighters would need every advantage possible. Speed wouldn't be enough against determined resistance. Firepower alone couldn't guarantee victory over larger numbers. The aircraft that emerged from Tank's vision would need to be both sword and shield. It must strike with devastating force while protecting its pilot from retaliation. Survival and lethality must merge in one design. Against expert opinion and conventional thinking, the project moved forward. Resources flowed toward this unorthodox concept. Engineers began translating philosophy into aluminum and steel reality. The shadow of the butcher bird was taking physical form. Soon it would darken skies across every battlefield. Allied forces would learn to fear its distinctive silhouette above all others. Summer heat shimmered over German airfields in 1939. Inside factory hangars, a revolutionary shape took form. Broad wings sprouted from a tubby fuselage. The wide landing gear splayed outward like a predator's stance. June 1st brought the moment of truth for tanks' vision. Test pilot Hans Zander strapped himself into the prototype's cockpit. The BMW 139 Radial engine coughed to life with mechanical violence. Zander lifted the machine skyward on its maiden flight. He returned hours later, drenched in perspiration and shaking with exhaustion. The cockpit temperature had reached 55 degrees Celsius during the test. Flying the prototype felt like sitting in a blast furnace, he reported. The engine's heat threatened to cook him alive. Yet beneath these flaws lay promise that couldn't be ignored. Raw power flowed from the Radial engine in abundance. The aircraft responded to controls with authority. Stability impressed everyone who witnessed the flights. Minor problems could be solved through engineering refinement. Engine troubles plagued early development work consistently. The BMW 139 proved unreliable under stress. Power fluctuations made flying dangerous. Heat management remained a critical, unsolved problem. Engineers switched to the BMW 801 power plant for better results. This 14-cylinder twin-row monster delivered over 1,500 horsepower reliably. Installation required moving the pilot's position rearward several inches. The change solved multiple problems simultaneously. Cockpit temperatures dropped to manageable levels immediately. The pilot gained better weight distribution for the aircraft. Visibility improved dramatically from the new position. For the first time, a German fighter actually served its pilot, rather than punishing him. Comfort mattered in long combat missions. Fatigue could kill as surely as enemy bullets. Innovation continued with the Commandojet engine management system. A single lever controlled fuel mixture, propeller pitch, and supercharger settings automatically. This mechanical brain freed pilots from complex engine management during combat. No longer would pilots juggle multiple controls while dodging enemy fire. They could focus entirely on tactical situations. The aircraft would think for itself mechanically. Such automation was revolutionary for its era. Armament philosophy followed the same practical approach as everything else. Early prototypes carried twin machine guns in the nose, cowling. Additional weapons filled wing bays with synchronized firing patterns. Soon, heavier cannons joined the arsenal as standard equipment. Production aircraft bristled with devastating firepower from multiple weapon systems. This predator's talons could shred any opponent quickly. The wing design told tanks' story most clearly of all. Forged as single pieces, they provided exceptional structural strength. Hidden joints disappeared beneath smooth aerodynamic surfaces completely. No delicate thoroughbred would survive what this warhorse could endure. The wings could absorb tremendous punishment and continue flying. Battle damage that would cripple other fighters barely affected this machine. Wide-set landing gear provided stability on rough forward airstrips. While Messerschmitts toppled over on uneven ground, the FW-190 sat firmly planted. Operational flexibility meant everything in mobile warfare. Production began in earnest during 1941 with the FW-190A model. The BMW 801C engine pushed the aircraft past 600 kilometers per hour in level flight. Armament included 4 machine guns plus 2 20mm cannons. Jagdgeschwader 26, under Adolf Galland, received the first operational aircraft on the Channel front. There the legend would be born in fire and smoke. British confidence would shatter on first contact. When Butcher birds first attacked RAF patrols, the effect was immediate and shocking. Spitfire Mark Vs fell from the sky in flames. Pilots returned with stories of invincible German fighters. The FW-190A climbed faster than anything Britain possessed at low altitudes. It rolled with unmatched agility in tight turns. Its firepower struck with terrifying effectiveness against aluminum structures. Then fate handed the Allies an incredible gift, wrapped in pilot error. Oberleutnant Armin Faber became disoriented in cloud cover during June 1942. He mistook a Welsh RAF base for his own German airfield. Faber landed his FW-190 intact on enemy soil by mistake. Within hours, British technicians swarmed over their prize. Test flights confirmed their worst nightmares about German technical superiority. At low and medium altitudes, the Butcher bird outclassed the Spitfire Mark V completely. Britain scrambled to rush the improved Spitfire Mark IX into production as an emergency measure. Meanwhile, the Focke-Wulf continued evolving through constant refinement. Tank and his engineers embraced adaptation as core philosophy. Each variant addressed new battlefield requirements promptly. The FW-190A became fighter-bomber ground attacker and interceptor simultaneously. Some versions carried reinforced armor plating for ground attack missions. Others mounted heavy cannons for bomber interception duties. By 1943, 30mm cannons could rip heavy bombers apart with single bursts. GR-21 rocket tubes created terror among Allied bomber formations. Crude but devastating, these weapons broke up tight defensive boxes. From sleek hunter to muscular predator, the evolution continued relentlessly. Each battlefield demanded new capabilities. Each challenge produced innovative solutions. The aircraft grew more dangerous with every modification. War would test every aspect of tanks' design philosophy thoroughly. From Channel duels to Eastern Front savagery, the FW-190 would prove its worth repeatedly. The Butcher bird had found its wings. Pale autumn sunlight glinted off metal surfaces as shadows crossed the English Channel. September 1941 marked a turning point in aerial warfare. Something new was stirring above the waves. Jagdgeschwader 26 pilots prepared for their first combat missions with an unfamiliar aircraft. The FW-190A sat on French airstrips, looking stubby beside elegant Messerschmitts. Appearances deceived everyone completely. British Spitfire formations crossed the Channel expecting routine encounters with known opponents. They had learned to fight Bf-109s through bitter experience. Tactics evolved around familiar enemy capabilities and limitations. Then the Butcher bird struck without warning or mercy. RAF pilots found themselves hopelessly outmatched in seconds rather than minutes. The new German fighter rolled faster than anything they had experienced. Its climb rate at low altitude exceeded their aircraft's performance dramatically. Cannon fire struck harder than machine gun bullets ever could. Spitfires that might survive multiple hits from rifle-caliber rounds disintegrated under 20mm explosive shells. Death came instantly instead of gradually. Within weeks, Fighter Command issued grim operational orders throughout RAF bases. Avoid engagement with FW-190s unless absolutely necessary, the directive stated. Such admission of inferiority was unprecedented. For Luftwaffe pilots, the psychological transformation was intoxicating beyond description. They had grown weary of flying fragile Bf-109s where single mistakes proved fatal. Now confidence surged through their ranks. Wide landing gear eliminated the terror of takeoff accidents that plagued narrow-track fighters. Clear canopies provided hawk-like vision in all directions. The Radial engine absorbed battle damage that would kill liquid-cooled power plants. Pilots described flying the FW-190 as partnership rather than constant struggle. The aircraft worked with them instead of against them. Survival odds increased dramatically for those lucky enough to fly it. War never confined itself to single theaters of operation for long. By late 1941, the butcher bird spread eastward toward different battles. Jagdgeschwader 51 and 54 began receiving new fighters on the Eastern Front. Over vast Russian plains, the aircraft proved itself against different opponents under harsher conditions. Brutal winter cold challenged every mechanical system. Rough frozen airfields tested landing gear strength daily. Soviet Yak and Lei-GG fighters fell before the FW-190's cannons like wheat before a scythe. In one furious week during January 1943, a single unit claimed nearly 90 enemy aircraft destroyed. The wide undercarriage handled conditions that defeated narrow-gear fighters completely. While Bf-109 struggled on uneven surfaces, the butcher bird planted itself firmly. Operational flexibility translated directly into tactical advantage. North Africa heard the growl of radial engines as desert campaigns intensified. Special sand filters prevented intake clogging in harsh conditions. The 190s roared across Tunisian skies, slashing at Allied convoys. JG-2 and JG-26 pilots found themselves diving low with bomb loads beneath their wings. The fighter-bomber role came naturally to tanks' versatile design. Ground attack missions proved as deadly as air-to-air combat. Life with the butcher bird carried risks that demanded respect. Dive bombing exposed stability problems in certain flight regimes. Sudden turbulence could throw the aircraft into uncontrollable rolls. Yet pilots respected the machine's resilience above all other characteristics. Time and again, FW-190s returned riddled with bullet holes. Engines ran on half their cylinders. Wings showed gaping tears. Still, they managed to land on battered airstrips and fly again after repairs. Survivability was their silent weapon, an assurance to pilots that they might live to fight another day. As 1942 unfolded, Allied desperation to understand this phantom grew exponentially. Intelligence services scrambled for information about German technical capabilities. Then human error provided what spies could not obtain. Oberleutnant Armin Faber became disoriented during a routine patrol in June. Thick clouds obscured familiar landmarks completely. Navigation equipment failed at the critical moment. He spotted an airfield through breaks in the overcast and descended gratefully. Only after landing did Faber realize his mistake. Welsh RAF personnel surrounded his aircraft immediately. Within days, Farnborough test pilots flew the captured machine extensively. Their reports confirmed Fighter Command's worst fears about technical inferiority. The Spitfire Mark V was indeed outclassed completely. Only with the rushed introduction of the Spitfire Mark IX could Britain regain some measure of parity. For nearly 2 years, the butcher bird had dictated terms of aerial combat across Europe. Its presence forced Allied aircraft development to accelerate rapidly. Every innovation in British and American aviation bore the shadow of German superiority. The FW-190 had reset the technological arms race. With each new variant, the aircraft grew more formidable and adaptable. Longer wings appeared for high-altitude missions. Heavier armor protected ground attack variants. Greater firepower addressed bomber interception requirements. Tanks' philosophy of versatility paid dividends across multiple battlefields. One basic design could fill numerous roles effectively. Specialization gave way to adaptation as warfare evolved. For the Luftwaffe, these early victories painted portraits of invincibility. Pilot confidence soared to dangerous levels. The butcher bird seemed capable of conquering any opponent. Yet storm clouds gathered beyond the horizon. Across the Atlantic, American factories roared to life. The United States was entering the war with industrial might that dwarfed European production. Soon the skies would darken with bombers. Flying fortresses and liberators would arrive in numbers that challenged imagination. The FW-190 had proven itself against fighters. Now it would face formations of heavy bombers bristling with defensive guns. The greatest test of tanks' design lay ahead. Steel birds would clash in battles that determined the fate of nations. Dawn crept across German airspace on October 14, 1943. High above the clouds, American engines thundered eastward in disciplined formations. Hundreds of B-17 flying fortresses crawled toward their target. Schweinfurt lay ahead with its vital ball-bearing factories. The mission would etch itself into aviation history. For bomber crews and fighter pilots alike, this day would never be forgotten. The FW-190s rose to meet them carrying weapons that seemed monstrous on single-seat fighters. Beneath each wing, long rocket tubes gleamed in morning light. WGR-21 rockets, crude but devastating when fired into tight bomber formations. As the bomber stream pressed deeper into defended airspace, contrails twisted across blue sky. The Focke-Wulfs dived from above like stooping hawks. Pilots leveled off and triggered their terrible cargo. Storms of fire lanced into the formations. Explosions blossomed like dark flowers among silver wings. Shrapnel tore through aluminum skin, scattering engines like burning meteors across the sky. Single rockets could damage 3, even 4 bombers in one shattering blast. Then the cannons spoke with authority that dwarfed machine gun chatter. 20-millimeter shells, sometimes paired with 30-millimeter cannon fire, tore giants apart. Fortresses staggered with flames licking across their wings. Men scrambled toward escape hatches as parachutes blossomed too late. Others spun toward Earth, with 1,000-gallon fuel loads igniting fields below. Yet this was no one-sided massacre as appearances suggested. From each B-17 bristled multiple 50-caliber machine guns. Each gunner fired blind into chaos, with tracer rounds crisscrossing the air. Red and white arcs glowed against blue sky, creating cages of fire. Through these killing fields, the butcher birds flew headlong. Their radial engines howled as rounds punched into airframes. From this maelstrom emerged tactics that froze bomber crews with pure dread. German aces Georg Peter Eder and Egon Meyer led squadrons in frontal attacks rather than tail chases. Instead of approaching bristling rear gun positions, they pointed noses directly at bomber cockpits. At closing speeds exceeding 600 miles per hour, collision seemed inevitable. For terrible seconds, front gunners watched dark crosses growing larger. Cannons flared with muzzle flashes. Death rushed straight into their eyes with mathematical precision. At the last instant, FW-190s peeled away, leaving shattered cockpits behind. Wounded pilots struggled with controls. Burning aircraft tumbled from formations like falling stars. Survivors remembered it as pure terror made manifest. Coming head-on, they looked like black crosses flying out of the sun, one gunner recalled decades later. You fired, prayed, and braced for collision. The results were catastrophic beyond measure. 60 bombers fell that day. 60 flying fortresses, each carrying 10 men. Hundreds were lost to fire steel and parachutes that never opened properly. American airmen called it Black Thursday, with bitter accuracy. For the Luftwaffe, it represented triumphant proof. The butcher bird could gut even the toughest prey when properly employed. Yet triumph carried shadows that few recognized initially. Every attack cost aircraft and pilots. Rockets weighed the FW-190s down, making them slower and clumsier against escort fighters. Escorts were indeed coming in numbers that would change everything. Spring 1944 brought long-range fighters deep into German airspace. P-51 Mustangs shepherded bombers all the way to targets. The balance shifted overnight, from hunting to being hunted. What had been massacre now became duel. More often than not, it became slaughter of the hunters rather than their prey. Still in those brutal months before escorts ruled supreme, the FW-190s fought with desperate ferocity. They launched into bomber streams ignoring impossible odds, sometimes forming Sturmbucke storm battalions of heavily armored aircraft. These storm units were designed to ram bombers if conventional attacks failed. Cockpits lined with steel plates, wings reinforced against collision damage. They flew straight into walls of defensive fire. 30mm cannons tore B-17s apart in single bursts when they connected. The price was unimaginable for pilots who faced seas of tracer fire. Clouds of flak peppered the sky continuously. Endless drumbeats of 50-caliber rounds hammered armor plating. Some returned with wings shredded and engines half destroyed. Blood-stained cockpits told stories of wounded men who somehow survived. Many never returned at all to tell their tales. The Luftwaffe was bleeding experienced pilots faster than training could replace them. The butcher bird proved its worth, but Germany ran out of men. Innovation continued even amid desperation and declining resources. British bombers rained fire across German cities nightly. Radar-guided night fighters couldn't be built fast enough to stop them. So the Luftwaffe sent FW-190s up alone into darkness. Single-seat predators hunting in seas of black sky. The tactic earned the name wild sow, wild boar hunting. Without radar or guidance, pilots hunted with eyes alone. They used searchlight glows and burning cities for navigation. Lancaster silhouettes against moonlight became their targets of opportunity. It was madness flying blind through their own flak, sometimes colliding with friendly aircraft, often never returning from solo missions into hell. But when it worked, devastation followed. Bomber crews already terrified of flak and mid-air collisions faced sudden cannon fire from invisible predators. The butcher bird had become symbol of German desperation and ingenuity combined. From rockets in daylight to reckless night hunting, it embodied a nation fighting with its back against the wall. But tides were turning as 1944 progressed relentlessly toward German defeat. Mustangs owned high altitudes completely. P-47 Thunderbolts and P-38 Lightnings carved through air, punishing any interceptor that lingered. The FW-190's strengths couldn't offset crumbling resources. Brutal firepower, rugged construction, and adaptability meant nothing without fuel or pilots. The hunter had become the hunted across every battlefield. Yet, even mounting losses couldn't dim its reputation. To men inside bombers, its silhouette still meant terror approaching. Its howl still announced death was near. To its pilots, it remained a machine that gave fighting chances against impossible odds. The climax was written in fire over Schweinfurt, in smoke above Hamburg, in black skies over Cologne. The butcher bird proved both genius and limitations in those hours. It could shatter fortresses and break morale, but it couldn't break the tide of war itself. The tragedy wasn't mechanical failure, it was loss of men who flew it. Young, hurriedly trained pilots hurled repeatedly into storms until ranks thinned to nothing. The butcher bird earned its reputation by consuming the very force that sustained it. European skies had transformed completely by 1944. Where once the butcher bird ruled with fire and steel, now dark swarms of Allied escorts filled the heavens. P-51 Mustangs with shimmering wings and endless range flew beside bombers deep into Germany's heart. For the first time, Luftwaffe hunters found themselves hunted relentlessly. The FW-190, once feared as invincible, now struggled against overwhelming numbers. Rocket tubes and armor plating slowed aircraft down dramatically. Overloaded with cannons, the fighters became clumsy prey for sleek escorts. Mustangs slashed through Sturmbucke formations before they could close with bombers. Thunder of Radial BMW engines was drowned by Merlin power diving fast. Losses mounted at pace, Germany could not sustain indefinitely. Veteran pilots were gone, dead captured, or too exhausted for combat duty. In their place came boys with handful of training hours. Against seasoned American aces, their chances remained slim despite good aircraft. The FW-190 could still fight effectively. The men flying them could not keep up with demands. Desperation drove development of new variants like the long-nosed Dora. The FW-190D9 emerged with extended fuselage powered by Junkers Jumo 213 liquid-cooled engine producing greater altitude performance. It soared higher and faster, finally able to duel Mustangs on equal terms at altitude. Pilots called it long-nosed Dora, sleek and elegant, a predator reborn for high-altitude warfare. Yet too few arrived too late to change outcomes. Fuel shortages left them grounded more often than airborne. Even perfect aircraft meant nothing without gasoline to power their engines. Then came the Ta-152 ultimate evolution of tank's original vision. Long wings stretched wide, built specifically to duel Mustangs in thin air at 30,000 feet altitude. In rare encounters, it proved devastating capability, slashing Allied aircraft from sky with ease. But fewer than 100 ever flew operationally. By the time they reached front lines, Germany was collapsing. No fighter, however advanced, could reverse tide of war. The butcher bird itself became victim of Germany's desperate situation. Sabotage crept into its production lines systematically. Factories manned by forced laborers harbored prisoners from occupied nations. Small acts of defiance took root in assembly processes. Rags stuffed into fuel lines, wires clipped where inspection wouldn't notice. One FW-190 crash-landed in Soviet swamp during 1943 lay untouched for decades afterward. When recovered in 1989, restorers discovered fuel line blocked deliberately by saboteur's hand. The aircraft had been betrayed from within its own production system. The Allies recognized changes in their opponents clearly. In 1941 and 1942, RAF pilots dreaded FW-190 encounters. By 1944, they almost welcomed such meetings. A Mustang pilot wrote years later, "If you met one, you knew he was brave." But bravery wasn't sufficient anymore. They came at us heavy, slow, and out of options. We cut through them like scythes through wheat. For the Luftwaffe, costs became unbearable rapidly. Entire Gruppen were wiped out within weeks of deployment. Aircraft sat idle, lacking fuel for operations. On January 1, 1945, desperate gamble called Operation Bodenplatte hurled hundreds of fighters at Allied airfields. It was meant as blow of defiance against overwhelming odds. Instead, it became massacre of remaining strength. 250 fighters lost along with Germany's last experienced pilots. The FW-190 hadn't failed as machine or concept. It remained versatile, rugged, and lethal until war's end. But war isn't fought in blueprints or specifications. It's fought with men, fuel numbers, and time. In each category, Germany's reserves ran completely dry. The aftermath proved bitter for surviving participants. Wrecks of butcher birds littered Europe from French hedgerows to eastern swamps. Some lay hidden in barns by sympathetic farmers. Others rusted where they fell decades earlier. Black crosses faded beneath moss and snow. For Allies, each wreck told identical stories. A formidable enemy broken not by design flaws, but by overwhelming force applied relentlessly. Even in defeat, the silhouette lingered in memory. It had been born from defiance, challenging convention at every turn. It ruled skies, struck terror, and forced innovation. As the Reich crumbled, its wings were broken. But legends had only begun taking flight in post-war aviation history. The war ended with cities in ruins and skies empty of their hunters. Germany, carved into rubble, accepted unconditional surrender. Amid wreckage lay twisted frames of thousands of FW-190s, silent carcasses of predators once feared across continents. Yet from broken wings rose legacies that echo through flight history still. For Allies, the butcher bird was lesson written in blood and smoke. It forced Britain to accelerate Spitfire evolution. It compelled America to extend escort fighter ranges, birthing Mustang dominance over European skies. Every Allied aviation innovation from 1941 to 1944 bore shadows of FW-190 influence. The fighter had dictated arms race pace, proving survivability, firepower, and versatility mattered as much as speed or elegance. Its impact shaped aerial warfare development for generations. To its pilots, the FW-190 was more than machine or weapon. It was partner in survival during impossible circumstances. Men who cursed BF-109 fragility found in Butcher Bird a companion. It forgave mistakes, absorbed punishment, and gave chances for another day. Veterans spoke with respect, not fear of aircraft that carried them through overwhelming odds. Final variants showed German engineering achievements when desperation met ingenuity. The Dora could match Mustangs blow for blow. TA-152 soared higher than any piston fighter. They were glimpses of what might have been with time and numbers, reminders that brilliance flickered in workshops even as Reich crumbled around them. Perhaps most haunting legacy lies not in victories or defeats, but in symbolism. It embodied paradox of engineering marvel built for doomed cause. Triumph of design, monument to futility. For every fortress shattered, more followed behind. For every Spitfire outflown, another rose to meet challenge. Butcher Bird could terrify, but couldn't turn tide. Today, few FW-190s remain restored and gleaming. Their engines rumble once more at air shows. To see one climb skyward, glimpses ghost of age, when steel birds decided nations' fates. They remind us history isn't only about victory. It's about machines, men, and choices that shaped world consumed by fire. The FW-190 teaches simple truth about warfare. War isn't won by sharpest blade alone. It's won by weight of time, reach of industry, endurance of nations. Butcher Bird flew with unmatched ferocity. Even fiercest predators cannot survive when entire world turns against them. The machine was magnificent. The cause was doomed from start.